So, back in 2012, I had this crazy idea to launch a daily podcast, interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs. And at that point in my life, I had never done anything like that. I mean, I grew up in Maine, went to college on an Army scholarship. I spent 8 years as an officer in the US Army. Then I tried law school, corporate finance, commercial real estate, and none of that kind of panned out for me. So, here I was at 32 years old, starting an entrepreneurial venture for the very first time in my life. And frankly, again, I just didn't know what I was doing, but I said, how do you get better at something? Well, you actually do the thing. So I launched a daily podcast interviewing successful entrepreneurs. 7 years later, as you and I are talking right now, I've interviewed over 2,300 successful entrepreneurs. Some of the biggest names in the world, like Tony Robbins, Barbara Corcoran, Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk. I've built a business that generates over 7 figures of net profit every single year for the past 6 years now. And, my podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, is getting over 1 million listens every single month. And I've been able to have Jason down to my house in Puerto Rico twice now. Yes. So I think my life is complete.
Love it. I love how you talk about net profit. That was one of the things that you mentioned at the mastermind.
True.
And if you could talk a little bit about net profit, why it's so important to track that versus gross, which was something you see a lot of online entrepreneurs doing, is showcasing their gross. They're pulling up their Stripe accounts, not talking about what they're actually taking home, and just flashing around their gross numbers. So what's your take on that?
I think gross profit is very aptly named, meaning it is gross. And by that, I mean, listen, I'm not against gross profit, because guess what? That means you're actually bringing in money. But guess what? That can be unbelievably and easily inflated and manipulated, meaning hey, if I wanted to make $10 million this year, I could in a heartbeat. I would just have to spend $15 million in Facebook ads and I would make $10 million. But guess what? I'm in negative $5 million overall because of business expenses and all these different things. So, I mean, there's so many companies on the Inc. 500. I hate the Inc. 500. It's I see this company, they brought in $3.4 million and they have 174 employees. I'm that company's going underwater. I mean, they're not making any money. They're paying 174 people, offices, this and that, and they made $3.4 million. I mean, I know what it's like making $3.4 million. I do it every single year. And I have a team of 5 people, 3 of which are in the Philippines, and I pay them $1,000 each. I mean, I know what that looks like running a business at that level. And so it's just kind of crazy to me that so many people are willing to be oh, I did a 7-figure launch. And, Selena Sue was very upfront in our mastermind as well, where she's I did a 7-figure launch and made $16,000. She's I literally had an hourly wage of $4 an hour during that launch. She's it was insanely brutal when I ran the numbers after paying affiliates, paying taxes, paying expenses, doing this, doing that, blah. So it's just what kind of business do you want to run? And that's what we were talking about over the mastermind was, do you want to run a business that's growing, adding more people, bigger expenses, more money, all these things, which by the way, if you do want to run that business, you should. Great friends of mine like Amy Porterfield are doing that right now and having a lot of success. Or do you want to just be a lean, mean net profit machine? I chose the latter. It's not the right choice. It was my choice. Amy's choosing the prior. She wants to go big or go home. And so that's not the wrong choice or the right choice. It's her choice. And that's my point. But at the end of the day, we've been publishing our income reports for 74 months in a row. And I'm just obsessed with keeping the money that I make. One of the big reasons why I moved to Puerto Rico, and that whole backstory, of course. But the reality is, I'm obsessed with tracking my net profit percentage. So we post that every single month. And if it's below 70%, 70%, I'm not happy. I want it in the 80s or 90s, which is an insane number, by the way. But I am so focused on that because that's where I want to move the needle. That's important to me.
Awesome. I love it. And that's something I'm definitely trying to do in my business too, is really hone in on that net. Our expenses are starting to get a little out of control, and we're really trying to focus on reining those back in, because net is literally, it's the most important thing. And
it's the most important thing. And listen, you've got this beautiful, baby now, and it's you're going to want to not have to be managing a team of 30 people. It's going to take time, energy, effort, and bandwidth. You want to be able to spend time with, that adorable child that you have and just, do all those things. So, I mean, I think people really need to just say, hey, what do I want to be doing? What do I want to run? And if you were a single dude, with nothing else going on in your life, hey, maybe you make other different choices, and maybe you do want to just completely run that business and grow and make massive impacts, but sit down and figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned know what you want. So that's like super important. And I know you have that like laser focused in, you know exactly what you want. You've got your days super structured to get what you want. Can you talk about that for a minute? Like you have like a super strict regimen as far as like timelines and stuff like that. Like you are super impressive. So talk about that, your structure and how that gets you to where you want to be and living the lifestyle you want to live.
Well, first off, thank you. Coming from you, that means a lot because you're also a very structured, disciplined individual as well. But the reality is this, like I did not start day one back in 2012 of Entrepreneurs on Fire with what I have now today, 7+ years later. In fact, you know, from 2012 to 2015, I made a ton of mistakes. Like I was way too focused on working harder, working more and more and doing all those different things. And as a result, my health actually really suffered. Like my health was just really not where I wanted it to be. And I looked in the mirror one day and saw that. And I said, this needs to change. So 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. So for a long time now, my number one priority has been my health, my wellness. You know, I have a functional medicine doctor, Dr. Stephen Cabral, who I meet with very often to make sure that, you know, all my health markers are correct and all these different things. But the biggest thing he instilled into me, which I now do, which you're talking about when it comes to regimented, is what does your morning routine look like when it comes to self-care? So I dedicate the first 90 minutes every day to my personal self-care. By the way, it started years ago at 20 minutes, but then I'm 30, then 45, and then an hour. And I just continue to step it up because I know that I operate the best when I'm feeling my best, and I'm feeling my best when I'm practicing high levels of self-care. So when I wake up after hopefully a good night's sleep, which my Oura Ring does track, so I know if I'm sleeping well or not, I'm going on a nice walk here in Puerto Rico, breathing the fresh air, getting the sunlight for vitamin D, coming back. I'm hitting up my workout with Jeff, so I'm doing strength training. Then I'm jumping on my Peloton bike, which by the way, just got installed today, Jason. You know, I was talking about that. So it's there now in my actual gym. So I'll be doing 30 minutes of aerobic exercise with that. Then I jump in my infrared sauna for another 30 minutes and just sweat and get that all out. Then I'm up here, I'm showering, coming over to my Chase Lounge over here after my shower. You can see that in the corner right there. And I'm meditating, I'm journaling, I'm again practicing now mental self-care after that physical self-care I just went through. And then and only then, 90 minutes later, am I doing this, getting in front of my computer and working on work. And I do that typically from somewhere around 9 o'clock, sometimes to noon, sometimes to 2. Today, I'm working straight till 6 because I'm doing 20 interviews on other shows today because one day a month, I batch like a baller and I get all of my interviews on other shows done in this manner. But again, that's one day a month. So all the other days a month where I'm not doing batching like baller days, I'm able to, you know, really be focused on the creative projects that move my business forward.